joining us for the first time, Sarah Valenzuela, who did a phenomenal job covering the Angels on the beat for the LA Times. And unfortunately, the LA Times decided they're like barely covering baseball anymore and made a ton of layoffs. But yeah, it is sad, the story, as I obviously poke fun at it a little bit. But Sarah, great to have you on here for the first time. Sorry about the news with the company. Obviously, it has nothing to do with you, and excited to see your next steps. But how are you, and how was the past year, especially covering the Angels?
Thank you, first of all, so much for even having me on. I'm truly honored and humbled to be here. The last year, it's funny because I joined the beat in June 2022, and it was at kind of a weird time. They had just come off that 14-game losing streak, so I came into a clubhouse that I was unfamiliar with. The vibes were kind of weird. I was trying to get people to talk to me. No one really knew who I was. Coming into the 23 season, getting to see everyone from the start, like night and day. Everyone was so happy, but then as the season progressed, it kind of just got to a point where it was like, I'm kind of tired. You guys are probably kind of tired. But still, witnessing the 23 season for all its highs and its lows was incredible. Just for me, a baseball fan and as a journalist, it was a privilege to be there.
So it says here you worked for the New York Daily News for 3 years. New York
I did.
Yankee. Yes, you're Queens native. I've been reading up on you, girl. You're doing your thing. I see you. I see you. Queens native. You work for the Yankees and the Mets. Talk to me a little bit so people can understand the little differences. I mean, going out to California and working in New York. Talk to us a little bit about East Coast and West Coast and what you like, what you didn't like.
So different. Being the backup writer for the Mets and Yankees, I mean, there's so much more of a media presence. And in my head, I thought that was the norm. I had never been in another clubhouse before. So being around so many other writers and journalists, and then the certain types of access that we would have. And this was my first season helping with Yankees and Mets was, I believe, 2018 or 2019. I always forget. But then we hit pandemic and it was weird and everything was over Zoom. Everyone's asking questions, but we're all in the same room, but we're not in the same room. And then we get out of pandemic, and the first clubhouse instance we get, I think the first game I covered was a Mets game, but it was rained out. So I'm walking into into a clubhouse for the first time post pandemic when media are back in clubhouses. I'm just like, oh, right. People exist. And it was so weird seeing everyone again. But then shipping out to Southern California and going to cover Angels, like night and day. As far as American media goes, much way smaller cohort. It was really just the four of us, but then there's this huge following of Japanese media that are there just for Shohei Ohtani, and I was like, whoa, you guys all follow him everywhere he goes.
Yeah, exactly.
So night and day, but all learning experiences across the board. I am so sorry. My dog, I think he hears someone passing the door.
That's okay. No worries.
That's okay. We have dogs too. We get it. We had kids on here yesterday. I mean, dogs. I mean, it's all good, sir. We're
No
good.
rules. Anything goes.
Yeah, seriously. So you were talking about going from east to west, and then you walk into the Angels clubhouse. It's obviously daunting, especially in the middle of the year. So you're kind of like, man, they lost 14 games. I don't know who to talk to, who's good. That's a tough clubhouse, though, because Ohtani doesn't talk, right? Rendon clearly doesn't talk. He no habla inglés. So he doesn't talk. And then, Mike Trout, he's good, but he doesn't say a whole lot. He's kind of very cut and dry, which is fine. That's his choice. But when you cover the Angels, who do you go to? If you need a quote after a game, who do you go to and say, if I'm you, I go, okay, I want to talk to boom, because he's going to give me a great quote.
It varies by game. It really depends on what all happened. I'm trying to think. I really like speaking to Mickey Moniak. He was super insightful. Zach Neto and Logan O'Hoppe, when they were available, both also very insightful. Trying to think. Aaron Loop, when it was relevant, also pretty insightful, candid. Carlos Estevez also willing to be like open and candid. I think for the most part, a lot of the guys are open to speaking and are candid. It really just depends on what all was happening and who because I didn't I've tried to like walk the tightrope of, okay, if you had a bad game, I don't really want to, like, you're clearly upset, I don't really want to make it worse. um so I kind of just want to give some space a little bit, try to approach gently. If it was a good game, you kind of just look around the room and try to see who's riding the high of like, oh my god, yes, everything.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. I mean, as a player, listen, we also know it's part of our job. We have to answer questions. So, what was it like? I want to know what it was like. You never really got to talk to Ohtani probably one on one, right? He was always surrounded by a million. So, wouldn't you like to have access to like sit down with him and do an actual sit down interview, like all of us would, right? So, I know sadly you're not. Hopefully you're still going to be around the Angels, but like, wouldn't it? How different is it going to be for the guys, the reporter guys that are there, and there's no Ohtani to hope to get to say hi to him? I guess.
Yeah, it was definitely weird. It was when I first got into the Angels clubhouse, the first rule or one of the first rules I was told was, "Hey, Ohtani doesn't do one-on-ones. Don't really speak to him." We say like hi and like casual like greeting, but that was about it. But there were many times that I would have loved to speak to him one-on-one, or even just get some availability, especially that stretch after like August, afterwards from last season, after he had gotten injured. It was rough trying to dance around what everyone else had to say about him without actually hearing from him. And I feel like a lot of the time it was like that, even from 22 and even before he got injured in 23. It's a lot of just dancing around what anyone else has to say about him without actually getting something from him until it's his turn to speak again. But yeah, no, the access part it confused me for a little bit until I was, all right, I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Some guys, they don't like talking to media. Some guys are just like, you know what, come on over and I'll talk to you whatever you want to do. So my question to you is, they got Ron Washington, a guy, he'll talk to the media all day. He's got plenty of wisdom. He's a great guy. He's going to do well over there, I think. Talk to us about that signing and what he kind of brings to the table for this Angels team that, is on the outside looking in right now.
Yeah, I unfortunately I didn't have the chance to get to know Ron Washington like too much. I won't get to interact with him during spring training. But in the times I did interact with him, he speaks in like wisdom. It's like he's always trying to give advice. Uh,
Yes,
we did
100%.
we were when we had our during winter meetings, we have our breakfast. So all the media members have a breakfast with the managers. So I sit next to him. I don't even remember what I asked him. All I know is that it turned into like a life coaching advice. And I was like, yes, I agree. I'm here. I'm here with you.
Yeah, it's like something you didn't know you needed to hear, but then you hear it, you're like, man, that felt pretty good right now. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
That's good
um,
stuff.
but yeah, no, I think because of his personality, he's super energetic and he listens and he is so willing to give so much advice. I think that'll be very beneficial, especially for the young core that's going to be playing through 24 and beyond. Uh, Definitely something that they could probably lean on and would benefit them. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to dive into the team here a little bit. The bullpen last year was not good at all. It seems like they are putting some money and effort into the bullpen. How do you see that playing out? And it's a daunting division they have right here with all the signings and everything else. But how do you see? They've been doing that. Artie's been doing with getting the bullpen pieces. Stevenson's a really good pickup to name one. How do you think they're going to look when it comes to that part of their team?
Yeah, their bullpen has made Oh, well, Perry has made plenty of notable upgrades into the bullpen coming into 24. I mean, last year they had the fifth worst bullpen, so you have to believe it's only up from there. Um, last year aside from like it was they're battling kind of this trying to not tax the bullpen so much. They're battling also injuries in the bullpen. How do you make up for a lack of depth in the rotation when someone gets injured? It just trickles down into the bullpen. So having a little bit more of a stability in terms of veteran arms, or at least experienced arms, would definitely help them. I think I wrote a story last year just about how they were struggling to find that bridge in the bullpen to get to Estevez in the ninth. So you got to believe it's only up from here. The guys that they have brought in have shown potential in previous seasons that they are reliable as relievers, or could be reliable in relief. So they, on paper, this is good.
Agreed. But they obviously lost Ohtani, and they're bringing in bullpen help. Why won't Artie Moreno spend big on a starter? Why won't he bring in a starter, which they clearly need? They need probably more than one starter. And then with Ohtani gone, how is it going to affect guys like Reed Detmer said on here, hey, no more 6-man rotation. We're going to be on the standard 5-man, and Sandoval and some of the other guys. So why won't Artie Moreno, one, buy starting pitching? And two, do you think some of these young guys are going to be better off because they're going to be more on a set schedule and know when they're going to pitch?
Yeah. One of the many millions dollars of questions. Yeah. Artie has never historically been known for rebuilding anywhere or any part of this team. So them banking on having the core of young arms that they have for the rotation, the guys that they presently have, banking on that, but then also rebuilding in the bullpen. I mean, this kind of mirrors what they've done in previous seasons, where you build on what the weakest part is without kind of like tearing the whole thing down. And it all kind of goes back to no matter what, they think they want to be they want to be contenders every year. And even coming into this offseason, Perry said to us in the very beginning, I am still committed to building a winner in Anaheim. So Artie not wanting to spend money or just the team historically not spending too much money on starters. I mean, big question for Artie.
No kidding.
I spoke to him exactly 2 times, but neither was like substantial. It was just like, oh, hi, and just kind of running away.
Yeah.
But as far as the rest of the rotation goes without Ohtani, it may end up being a blessing in disguise when you consider Ohtani a phenomenal player who could pitch and hit. Of course, you want that on your team, but he also kind of handcuffed that rotation into that 6-man rotation. And especially last year, after all the injuries, it worked out somehow, but the results didn't actually play out. I mean, we know how the season ended. But it might be a blessing in disguise, especially for the not quite as young, but guys like Reed Detmers and Sandoval, or even Anderson, just to be on more of a stable routine, and not have to worry about, okay, well, if this guy didn't pitch this day, but he wants to go with this day, now we all have to figure out the rest of us. It might end up being a benefit. It might end up being a blessing in disguise for them.
Understood. I want to go talk about Rendon a little bit, playing against him, knowing the guy he is. And you laugh because we all know he's a little crazy, and that's why I love him. I want to talk about the situation last year with the bruise or the fracture. Remember, he talked about, well, it's actually fractured his foot or whatever it was, and now the team was saying it was bruised. You have any information about that? Because we want to get this story straight here. I want to get it straight. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were about the whole thing.
Yeah, no. I've never actually had any issues with Anthony Rendon. Whenever I wanted to speak to him, he popped up. But no, with the injuries, I honestly, I feel bad for the guy sometimes. I'm just like, man, how I can't imagine being so injured all the time when like you need to not be injured to do your job. Um, the bruise versus the fracture thing. So I actually spoke with a doctor about this because I was confused about like how several doctors could have like a discrepancy about it, or I'm trying to remember. I think it was like they went to like 3 doctors or 4 different doctors, all but one diagnosed it as a fracture. So I spoke to a doctor, and he was saying that the type of contusion that he had and the fracture were one and the same. They could be diagnosed as the same because they show up about the same on certain scans. This was one big like, what are you talking about in my head? Um, I honestly, I'm still kind of confused about it. The fracture part and the bruise part, one big bruise or slightly a fracture. I mean, but both just are awful. But yeah, I'm still kind of a little bit confused as to all of that because we got all this information on the same day, and it was just like, okay, so he's fine, but he's not fine. Because it was after he after that ball, I clipped him in the leg. Okay, we see this guy walking around on crutches. And he was on crutches for a little bit, but then one day he wasn't. So go up to him, hey, what's going on? Oh, well, they told me it's I'm not at risk of like breaking it or something like that. So he's like, I ditched the crutches to start walking. He starts doing more like on field activity. I'm like, okay, so he's coming back, maybe. But then we hear the fracture part. So I am still confused about it.
And yeah, I mean, I think they need to clean that up, which is, what Wash talked to us about on the show when we brought him on. He was saying I've talked to him on the phone, and he was going to go meet with him in person right after we were talking to him. So you just can't have that kind of like dissension from one of, your supposedly star players from the past. All right, so let's go to his teammate Trout. So why do you think he doesn't get more vocal about potentially looking for another destination? Because I mean, all signs point to this team going through some tough times over the next few years. It seems like they kind of had their window of opportunity. Unfortunately, didn't get to the postseason. I know there's some exciting young talent, but you also just have to weigh yourself against the division with the Rangers, the Astros, even the Mariners, a few steps ahead of them. So, I mean, I think most people would say the Angels probably aren't going to be good again until like 2026 or 7. So, why doesn't he request a trade?
From what I gather about Trout is he is both loyal and comfortable. At least this is how I piece it together in my head. When he didn't even get to his own free agency period. He kind of was just like, "Yep, I am staying here, and this is what it is." It was in my head. I rationalized this as he is a very loyal. He's very loyal to seeing this team through to what he can do. Um, and also he just likes where he is. He gets to play somewhere where it's, yes, there is pressure, but it's not quite the same kind of pressure as say maybe playing for the Dodgers. The fan base here will embrace the team here through good and bad. um, he is being compensated very, very fairly. Um, and but like beyond that, I think he is, for better or worse, committed to seeing this team that he started with getting to a place that he knows that he could say that he brought them to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. He's comfortable. He's comfortable. He's got the right to stay, and he likes Anaheim. He likes living in Newport Coast. I mean, I can't really blame him. It's kind of a nice place. I'm sure you've seen it when you're in your travels down there. It's not a bad place if you can live there, as you know. New manager now, Ron Washington comes in. What's he going to bring, and what's he going to bring? Maybe I should ask this because Phil Nevin's a friend of mine. I played for Ron Washington in Texas, and I know what Wash is. I know what Nev's about. What's he going to be able to change and get out of these Angels that other managers haven't been able to do?
I think a lot of where Ron's strength is from getting to know him a little bit and listening to other people talk about him is how he plays in that like mentor mentee role, and just trying to help bring the best out of some of the younger players. That and helping provide some guidance in terms of defense. Like every time we spoke to him through the off season, it was some kind of like, yes, I am a defensive mechanic or defensive. No, he didn't use the term wizard, but he touted his ability to upgrade a defense. And everyone liked to talk about how well he does with younger players. Since it will be a younger team coming in for next year, a younger core. That could be a difference maker. But all remains to be seen. Yeah.
Sarah, before we let you go, we do have a question here from a fan that's more on the media side, from Cliff. Cliff said, what's the secret to trying to get a player out of, quote, talking to the media mode? Like, trying to get the boring vanilla answer, hey, we're taking it one game at a time kind of situation, right? Some people have their tricks or secrets on maybe having a combo first about fantasy football for a minute or whatever, right? I don't know if there was anything that you used as a go-to that was helpful for you to kind of relate to people, or if it's just relationship building in general, that they kind of trust that you're there every day and you're going to take their quote for what it is.
For me, a lot of it is relationship building. Yeah, no, a lot of it is relationship building, but there are some times where you'll go into an interview and let's say it was a bad game. My approach is kind of a little bit more gentle. So like, hey, do you have a moment to maybe chat a little bit here and there? And I kind of just pose my questions a little bit more gently. And that kind of worked for me. There are some people who I just, as much as I try interview after interview, I got the same kinds of answers. And that's not even a matter of like relationship building. It's just that's their own media training. Don't say too much. Say like just enough to like get an answer. I'm trying to think who in David Fletcher. He was one. Like, it doesn't really matter how many times you talk to him. He kind of gave the same kinds of answers, and that's just how he answers. I got him to speak like a little bit more when I did a feature story on him and his brother Dominic, and he opened up just a little bit more, but
yeah, he's tough. He's tough to crack, right? That's fair. Well, Sarah, it was awesome having you on, and I agree with you, by the way. That is a good approach. I've used that approach in the past too. It's kind of like the innocent, like, hey, you just have a minute, like instead of the forceful.
Yeah.
Sometimes Todd Father probably can speak to this in New York, where it's like, Todd, like almost as if they're demanding, like, hey, you owe me this 10 minutes right now. It's more like, hey, do you have a sec for me? I know you're busy,
like,
right?
huh?
Which approach would work better? Sarah and me coming up saying, hey, you just have a sec? Or like, hey, Todd, I got you right now for 10.
And,
right?
I start speaking Spanish. I'm like, come on. Okay. Huh?
So good question there from Cliff. And
Good stuff.
Sarah, yeah, we appreciate it. Obviously, again, sorry to hear the news, but more sorry for them and obviously the fans that are going to miss out on great coverage. But now it'll get picked up somewhere else. So excited to see your next steps and where you're at. And for anyone that wants to follow Sarah, at Sarah_ISABELVEE, Sarah Isabel V. Thanks again, Sarah. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.